Now, to find out more on the latest in the U.S. election, we have VOA correspondent Jessica Stone. He is here with us. Jessica, can you give us the update on the U.S. election at the moment? Hello, Jessica.
Hey, good evening there. Well, we are live in Arlington, Virginia, where the polls are set to open in just about 2 hours' time. But the early vote is already up and at 'em here in Virginia. Harris leads by at least 6 points, according to the latest polls. But this is not really a key swing state any longer. As you were talking about, Pennsylvania is the big prize on election eve and on election day. It's got 19 electoral votes. That's the largest prize of all of the swing states. And so that is why we saw both of these candidates spending so much time in Pennsylvania. In the waning hours before the election, of course, we saw Harris go from one side to the other, west to east to west, crisscrossing the state, making her closing arguments and finishing in Philadelphia on those rocky steps. And then for Trump, we saw him begin the day in North Carolina, go to 2 stops in Pennsylvania, and then finish the day in Grand Rapids, Michigan, a more conservative part of the state. The strategies are as follows. Harris really needs to drive up the vote in urban areas and amongst women and young people. Trump needs to continue to drive up the vote in whites and men, and in places like North Carolina, he can't lose. He only won by less than a percentage point 4 years ago. He needs to hold on to North Carolina, but also make more progress in places like Pennsylvania. There's some chatter that he may in fact take Pennsylvania, but that is really remaining to be seen. What we are also watching is the impact of the early vote and how it's changed over the last 4 years. We have seen it change considerably because we have about half the number of people coming out to early vote in 2024 than we saw in 2020. We also see many more Republicans coming out to early vote. We have more than 78 million ballots early vote cast, and that is going to drive up the early vote. It does not mean Donald Trump will win, but it does mean that we're going to go into the election counting process today with a higher number of Republicans in some of the key swing states already having been counted. But back here in Arlington, Virginia, they will start to open the polls in just 2 hours' time. And that is also the hour when we will see the vote count begin in places like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Georgia, of those early votes, followed by the votes that happen later today.
Yes, Jessica, thank you so much for mentioning about the change of votes for the last 4 years. We learned something about that. But what we would really like to know is that at the moment we are speaking, who is leading the latest polls, Jessica?
No one is really leading in the battleground states. It's 48% to 48% in the latest New York Times Siena College poll. But we are seeing overall a national lead for Harris. But what's really critical is that we may not get a consistency between the popular vote, which is how the results overall nationally, and the battleground states. The battleground states, about 7 states, they're going to decide this election. That's Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, and North Carolina. These are the states we are fundamentally watching because this is a race that is won based on the Electoral College. These candidates, the first one to 270 or past it, will win. That is more important, really, than how many people come out to vote and who wins the majority of the population today.
Yes, Jessica, indeed. Now, more than 75 million Americans early voted. How does that compare to the last presidential election, Jessica?
Well, we know that more rural voters have come out early than urban voters, and that's something that has Democrats concerned because they largely tend to be favored by urban voters. And so they're watching that very closely. Again, we will go into today's count with a lead in some battleground states on the Republican side. But again, that does not mean that Donald Trump will win the election, even in those states, because we still have to get to the final vote count, which is only beginning today in some parts of the country, specifically in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Those states only begin processing ballots, meaning they literally open the envelope, look at the voter, make sure the voter is a legitimate voter, beginning at 7 a.m. today. So those states are going to take the longest to count. We will already have some early vote results from other battleground states, but we won't begin to announce those results or see those results until the close of polls this evening.
Now, you mentioned about the results. For the last bit would be, when will we learn about the results of the U.S. election vote, Jessica?
So remember that 4 years ago, it took 4 days for us to have a victor declared in the U.S. election, that being Joe Biden. We are anticipating that it will be at least that long to get this vote because, again, we have more people voting early, especially on the right. More Republicans have voted early this time, and those votes have to be counted before today's votes are counted. And there are so many states just starting to open those envelopes this morning at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Given that this is so close, we also anticipate more challenges to the elections. We've already seen a number of court cases filed and challenges filed on immigration issues surrounding who is a legitimate voter. And here in the state of Pennsylvania, we had a case where about 1,500 or 1,600 voters were kicked off the rolls, said that they were not legitimate voters. They can same-day register today if they do, in fact, have a right to vote. So those are the kinds of challenges that we're seeing state by state, especially in these critical battleground states. When you're talking about margins as thin as this, they're going to make sure that every vote is counted and every vote is vetted to make sure we have a legitimate election here in the U.S.
Yes, thank you so much for the report, Jessica. Happy election day right there in America, and stay warm, please.
Thank you. Same to you.